So, welcome to the Prayers Basis session. Lessons, how to run a great lesson. I'm really delighted to be able to welcome um, Trish and Becky from Bedford, who are going to help us think about how, if we're working in a primary school, what does it look like to do a really good lesson in a primary school? So, I'm going to hand over to them now.
Good evening. My name's Trish, and I work for Impact and Becky is my colleague. And we've been Impact's a Christian charity that's been going for about 34 years now. And we go into predominantly primary schools and also middle schools, because here in we cover Bedfordshire and Central Bedfordshire. And in Central Bedfordshire, we still have some middle schools. There's still the three tiers to school here. So we still have some schools that are like that. We cover around 60 schools in the area. So we cover quite a wide range of schools, ranging from church schools to private schools to community schools. So we get to work with all sorts of people from all walks of life. So it's really a great opportunity for us to meet with so many diverse communities in our area. And so we obviously support the RE curriculum in schools, but we offer other services as well as our prayer spaces. We offer assemblies and annual events and so many other things. But tonight, obviously, we're going to focus on our prayer spaces. I'm just going to share my screen. So when we go into prayer spaces in schools, we actually generally work with, when we tend to do our prayer spaces, it's with year 5s to 8. And our prayer spaces have different kinds of formats. We take, there's some that are just general, so there's no specific theme. And so we'd cover various topics within that. And they, we break that down into sort of different categories. So it could be the 4 categories will be that we cover, that we try and incorporate are topics to do, activities to do with God, family and friends, the wider world, as well as themselves, looking at themselves in that reflective space. And we find that the children get a lot, they're very enriched from that. And a lot of you, I know some of you already do prayer spaces in school, so you know a lot of the impact of prayer spaces. So we also do prayer spaces outside. We also do specific things as well, like for certain specific events. So like when it's your move for year 6s, we'll have specific prayer spaces catering for that as children move up to secondary school. We also, I'm going to touch on, we actually do creative prayer, which is something slightly different, which I'll explain in a short while. And we do that within our Life Path John Bunyan in Elstow, and also Life Path in John Newton in Olney. And it's one of the activities that the children can get involved with. And then we also work with the local John Bunyan Museum, because Bedford is famous for John Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress. And we do various activities with the museum. But one of the things we offer as well within that is a prayer space, which incorporates different links to the story of Pilgrim's Progress, so different parts of the story. And we've put it together in prayer stations format, which has been really it was very successful, actually. We've had a really good response to that, and children have really learned a lot and taken a lot from that. So we tend to do more generalized prayer spaces, but then we also have specific events. And then recently, just actually at the end of the summer term last academic year, we had the opportunity to trial out some slightly different things. Becky ran a lunch club, which was actually helping children to be able to develop their own prayer spaces within school, which was a great opportunity. And so she may want to elaborate on it a little bit later, but what the basic gist of it was, she got to run a series of sessions, and helping the children to come to understand what prayer space is about, coming up with their own ideas. And the ultimate aim was to create their own prayer space. And the teacher that came along to the sessions was so enthused that she actually got the school to create an actual space in the school where the children now have been able to set up their own prayer spaces and are going to take ownership of it and continue to create their own prayer spaces and manage that prayer space within the school, which is really fantastic. And they had the official opening at the beginning of this term, and that was very exciting. One thing I just touched on just now is obviously with prayer spaces, as you know, that generally tends to be where the children, we set out, generally depending on the space that we're given. If we're given a hall, we set up to about 12 stations, and the children have the free reign to go around and engage with each of the activities. But and that we tend to do for our year 5s to 8s. When I mentioned about creative prayer, that's something slightly different. We do that with our year 3s and 4s, where we create a space where there might be 4 or 5 stations, and there's a volunteer at each station, and they engage with the children, and they rotate, like between every 10 minutes, they rotate around the stations, and there's an interaction between the volunteer and the child, as well as then having an activity that they take part in. And we found this is also a great way to engage our local churches, because then volunteers from the local churches can come on board and join us as well, which is fantastic, linking them into their local school. And I ran a creative prayer, like RE lesson, in a school at the end of last term, where I created a creative prayer on like I don't know if you've heard of the teaspoon method. So it's like the TSP, it's like T for thanks, S for sorry, P for please. And then I had a 4th station, which was just general prayer. And what I did, I was able to then talk to the children about what prayer is, where you can pray, how you can pray, and have an introduction. Then it led into them rotating around the tables, and once again having local volunteers from local church come in. And they helped me in my lunch club there. So it was a great way to build that relationship and rapport with the children. But then from that time together, then we have at the end we got together. And from that, I was able to go to about 5 different classes over 5 weeks, which was great. And the school really enjoyed it. So it gave me that lovely hour that I could just spend with the children, and they could just really learn about prayer and engage with prayer, and go away having learned things. And what was quite encouraging, one of the teachers said to me after one of the sessions, she said, well, I can talk about these things in class, but no one normally talks back to me or explains how they feel about prayer or whatever topic they might be talking about in RE. And she said, I couldn't believe how they were just talking about prayer and being open about different things. So that was really encouraging to hear. So I'll just hand over to Becky now. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. I don't think I've got any slides for this one, so you can take them down if you want, Trish. I want to talk about how it's really important to help the children or the pupils to fully understand how to engage really well with the space, because otherwise they're not going to get the most out of it. So we have various ways that we try to do this. We've created an information pack that we send to schools beforehand that Trish will tell you about and a little bit more about. But as part of that pack, there are some guidelines in there that we ask the teachers to share with the pupils beforehand, so that they have an understanding of what they're going into and the way that they can kind of utilize the space best. Not very many schools do that, so some are really brilliant at that. Others are not so great. So either way, we always have a kind of an introduction outside of the prayer space. So before they actually enter the space, we find us. If we're in a hall, it's kind of outside in the corridor. If it's in a church, it might be in the sort of the porch of the church before we go in. But they don't actually get to go into the space until we've explained it and talked to them about it and given them some guidelines. So the way that we do that is we kind of explain to them who we are and introduce ourselves if they don't know us already. We explain why we're there and what they're about to take part in. And then we take them through some really clear guidelines. So just sort of bullet point guidelines, things like, this is your time just for you. So don't worry about what station your friends are at or what anybody else is doing. Just go around and explore the stations for yourself so that you get the most out of it. Or we might say something, well, we do say something like, give others chance to explore the spaces for themselves. So if you go to a station that you want to go to and it's busy, leave that person alone to carry on their own wanderings and go away and find something else to do and come back a bit later on. Don't hover and wait till they've finished, because that will make them feel rushed. And we also say things like, I'm just looking to see what it is that we also say. This is their time for reflection and for not speaking out and chatting along to their friends. So they shouldn't really need to talk in this space, because some of the stations we do are quite noisy. When we do them outside, or if we do sporty ones, then obviously they are noisy. But for the majority, when it's nice and peaceful, they don't need to talk. They just need to reflect and to spend their own time. So they shouldn't need to talk. If there is some stations where they might need to talk to some of their friends, then they can talk in a whisper. So we talk like that and we bring them down so they understand they need to talk quietly. So we just kind of give them some guidelines like that are clear guidelines, so they understand how to best to use the space. We explain about what prayer is. So before they're going in, we explain that prayer is a conversation with God. And as with any conversation, it's a two-way thing. It's not just talking at somebody, but it's also listening back for them. And we kind of give them some tips on how they can listen and maybe experience hearing God in the spaces. We do explain, though, that each of the activities are, first and foremost, they're kind of a reflections activity so that they can access it and then they can reflect on their own thoughts and feelings. But then there is also a how they can use it as a prayer if they wish, because we go into a lot of schools that are not just Christian schools and a lot of schools where there are non-Christian children. We kind of have to be very, very clear that, we're not asking them to pray. We're not making them pray in this space. It is their chance for them to reflect, and then they can choose to use this as a prayer in this way if they want to. But it's down to them personally, and we're not actually making anybody pray. So we also then explain, as Trish said, the majority of our stations are kind of general stations, and they have different types of stations that they go around. So there are some that will help them to explore about their own selves and their thoughts and feelings, some about people close to them, some about the wider world, and then some about God. And for those ones that are about God, we explain that they don't have to believe in God to access those stations, because it is about them thinking about their own thoughts and feelings about God. So they don't have to be Christian or be believers in God to actually access them, but they can still go to them and look at them and just explore their own thoughts and feelings about God a bit more, whether they have any or not. So all of the stations are accessible. And then we finish with a breathing or centering kind of exercise. So we get them to just calm down and to breathe. But when we say take a breath, everybody goes and breathes from here. But when you breathe from here, it sends nerve signals to your brain that you're in a panic, and it floods your body with all sorts of hormones to make you hurry up. So if we go in there with like that, they're all going in all excited. So we try to teach them to breathe from their diaphragms instead, because by breathing from their diaphragms, it sends nerve signals to your brain that everything's wonderful and calm, and you can be peaceful and calm, and it floods your body with wonderful, peaceful hormones. So we teach them to breathe from their diaphragms by putting their hands on their shoulders, because then that kind of stops these muscles from working too much and making their bellies move in and out. And we kind of just get them to breathe normally, not big breaths, and just calm themselves. And Trisha's got another way that she kind of does a centering exercise that is really great fun, that helps them to kind of center themselves. So for any particular stations that are a bit more need a bit more explanation, we do give a brief explanation before we go in, and we were also aware of the pupils as they're in the space, that if there's any that look a bit puzzled or that they're not quite accessing those ones, we'll kind of go over and whisper the instructions to them. So we're not interrupting the space either, but we do it quietly and kind of help them through it. We do always check with the schools beforehand if there are any children with any additional needs. And if there are children with additional needs, we kind of ask them to provide somebody that can support them with that. And obviously then they can go around and help them with the stations, talking quietly with them and explaining them. At the very end, we gather all together so that it's not just a kind of, you've done it, now go away. We kind of bring them all together. We ask them things like what you like really well, what went really well. We also ask them if there's anything that's puzzled them or surprised them or confused them or worried them. We might chat about that for a bit. And then we also make sure that we always leave them with, if there is anything that's upset you or worried you or you have questions about, please find a trusted grown-up that you can talk to about it, either in school or at home. Don't hold on to it, because we don't want, them to go away from the space feeling in any way bad. And then we also talk to them a little bit about how they can recreate some of those spaces in their own homes. So even if they don't have all the amazing equipment that we have, we try and kind of give them ideas for how they can recreate some of those in their own home. Like they could just get a blanket and build a little den. So they don't need a whole tent. Even if they haven't got a kind of LED tree with fancy leaves and things, just writing their worries down and getting their worries out is a great way to do it. So they could do that in a notebook or something. So we kind of explain how they can use those activities in their own lives as well, and we don't just leave it there.
We'll just end with a couple of stories, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I know for is that okay? Yeah. Just very quickly. Yeah. So I know I did a press space in a middle school, and I was doing it for a group of year 8s, and one of the young girls at the time, I didn't know, had been struggling with anxiety and being really anxious about moving up to upper school. And the staff member I have contact with got an email from the mum after she had attended a prayer space, and she said, my daughter has not stopped speaking about prayer space, and she said she has been so down the last few months, but she's come back like just like my normal daughter. I've got my daughter back, she said. And so just the impact of the prayer space is just as if it's lifted all those weights and worries that she must have been feeling, and had the opportunity to let them go. And so that was really encouraging to see that a prayer spaces doesn't only just impact the children themselves, but it has an impact on family as well as the staff. So yeah, that was very encouraging. So, Becky?
Yeah. I have a kind of similar one from I did a retreat day with some year 6s in a church. So it was a church kind of ran a retreat day, and then I was asked to do some prayer spaces as part of that. And as part of it, I had the bubble tube, it's like a long tube with lots of bubbles in it and color changing. And the instructions were kind of letting your prayers go up to God. I can send out the instructions. I might have even got it from prayer spaces in schools. I'm not sure which ones, because we've got various ones that we use with the bubble tube. And there was one particular group that come around, and this one boy sat there looking at this bubble tube for the whole time. And the teacher was kind of really worried and was like, "Oh, I've got to get him to move on. I've got to get him to." And I said, "No. If he's fine, if that's the one that he's happy at, leave him be at that one, because he obviously was, he wasn't just sitting there being not joining in. He was sitting there and really engrossed in it. So we kind of left him there to do that." And then they moved on and they went to the other activities, and I kind of forgot all about it. And then during the summer holidays, I got an email from the school, from the church, sorry, saying that the parent had contacted them and had said that the boy who was looking at the bubble tube, he had been experiencing really, really bad headaches. And the only time he felt any relief from it was looking at the bubble tube and was doing the instructions on the bubble tube. And they wanted to know where they could get the bubble tube from and what the wording was, so that they could recreate it at home for themselves, because it had such an impact on this boy. So the church obviously then contacted me. I wanted to go and give them my bubble tube right there and then, like gift it to them, but I couldn't, because then we wouldn't have one. So I went around and found some, and sent photos of what it was, and I sent photos of the station and sent the instructions to them, and they kind of recreated it in their own homes. But it was just really, really moving to hear that it had that much impact on this little boy, and I was so glad I hadn't made the teacher move him on or let the teacher move him on.
Becky, Trish, that brilliant, thank you. And those stories are just so moving. I kind of want to dive deeper into them, but but time is moving on. But thank you, because just the impact of prayer spaces that they can have. And I'm particularly intrigued by some of the work you've been doing. The way that what you're doing is finding its way into the home, into the pupils' homes. That's extraordinary and brilliant. So thank you so much for that. So there will be space for questions afterwards. So if you've got questions, yes, you can save them up or drop them in the chat now, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A with Becky and Trish in a bit. But I just want to hand over to Sam. Sam, you take the time that we already allowed you for. We'll go 5 minutes over. That's okay. So over to Sam Phillips from Stafford and the YouthNet. Sam, over to you.
Well, I'm just going to put my phone in front of me so that I can see it, because I can't see a timer on my computer. So thanks very much. It's really lovely to be here. This is my team. This is the YouthNet, and we work in we have about sort of 10 small projects. We're a small organisation, but we have lots of different projects intentionally that we would walk with young people from sort of 0 really through to sort of 18, 21 with all our different projects. And we have a faith-based project that is primary and secondary, and we also have this Connect Stafford Youth project, which is our detached project and works in the local college. So those are the sort of main projects that we deliver, prayer spaces or sacred spaces, which is what we call our secondary school prayer spaces. But there are also other workers who will deliver prayer spaces sort of as part of their project as well. So as a team, we've done 100 plus, probably a bit more now actually, but today I'm going to talk to you specifically about how we approach our secondary school sort of prayer stations, so sacred spaces, that's what we call them. So when we go into a school, we generally take over a classroom, and we would change that classroom as much as we possibly can so that the experience of it would be something completely different. So this is a picture of one of our sort of prayer spaces, so I'm going to talk to you about what I guess just some very practical things about how we run our lessons, what that looks like, and I guess make it just quite practical in terms of what that looks like. So for us, when we do lessons, we're in a classroom, and the school generally change the rooms so that the pupils will come out of their normal room into our room, and we will run 5 or 6 lessons every day for 2, 3, sometimes up to a week, but usually sort of 3 days. So you are they're coming out of normal lessons, so not necessarily coming out of an RE lesson. It might be history, geography, any lesson, so you have to sort of be ready for that. And for us, a lot of the preparation for making a good lesson, for it to work well, is in terms of your groundwork. So we work predominantly in and around Stafford. We do some prayer spaces outside of Stafford, but we are Stafford based, and we are wanting to be part of our local schools communities. So we work or have worked in 4 or 5 out of 7 of the local high schools that we have. So for us, it's very much about working out relationship. It's about having that conversation. What can you offer? What do they want it to be? What's their understanding of it, so that you can try and help them grow confidence in it. And those schools where we are in, we tend to be in every year now, because they understand it, they like it, they trust it. For us, a good lesson means talking practicalities before you even get there. So where is the classroom? How much space are they going to give you? How many kids do they think that they're going to put through each lesson? Because you need to have a handle on that so that you can set your space up to actually be able to accommodate the children that they are going to send you, and for them to have a good experience. So for us, when I quite like to set the space up on my own, or just with me and my team. The teachers often offer to help, but actually I really like to do it myself, because then I can pray in the space and I can just like really feel the space. Probably sounds a bit weird, but I like to feel how the young people are going to move around the space, and I like to feel what God wants to do in that space. So if I can, I will say thank you very much, but honestly, I'm really happy to do it myself. We like to think about different learning styles in the space. So when we think about the stations that we're going to put in, it's about how are we really allowing those young people to engage and to be able to access the stuff that we bring, the stations that we bring. So think about your visual learners, your auditory learners, your kinesthetic learners, those young people who enjoy peace and quiet, but those young people are a bit more like me, who find it nigh on impossible to like just switch into quiet. I need to be doing something to sort of bring myself in. And so how do we accommodate that? Think about the reading ability and the writing ability. So when we started, a lot of ours were very writing heavy, and we sort of had to learn about how we could adapt that. So for those, you know, we do year 7 through to year 11 in our secondary. So how do you differentiate all that with just one space? And for us, thinking about additional needs. So we've used talking tins, we've had a prayer station, a sacred space translated entirely into Braille for a particular young person, using dyslexia overlays, making sure that they're available. Have you got young people who are going to be using a wheelchair? You know, those sorts of practical things to actually allow young people to enter the space and enter the space well. We often have some sort of physical challenge for young people to do as part of our space. For those young people that find it more difficult to sort of just enter a space that's quiet, then how can we allow them to be noisy but not noisy? So how do we give those children something to focus on while the others settle and the others find their place? So we quite often I've had exercise bikes, I have very hard wooden challenges, I've done sort of practical almost like gym type things for if I know that I've got quite a few sort of year 10 boy groups coming through, just to try and get a little bit, almost give them permission to be active, knowing that when they're in the space they will come back, they will come down because the space seems to do something for them, but to give them that doorway through. I really like to zone my space, so have things together that are sort of quieter, and I like to walk the space myself. So what might be a good way to sort of go around it, and if I'm in this particular area, where might people be around me, so that to provide, your classroom space is not big, and when you've got classes of 30 in there, you need to be really thinking about how do you create those little spaces that 2 or 3 young people can stand in, so that they can feel a bit more private, and which of those stations that really need that sort of reflective, more physical space, and what are those other stations that they can do around each other. So yeah, and we do have that range of purely reflective through to sort of almost like crafty, creating, making stuff, because we also want the room to speak to subsequent classes. So what are they leaving for other people? So it's not just a here and now, but it's going forward. What time did I start, Phil? Tim, sorry. What time did I start?
You're doing fine. Keep going. Yeah. Got about another 6 minutes would be fine.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to go over. I always think about what sort of theme. So I work out the theme with the school before we go in, but even within that theme, so we've done, schools have wanted us to do British values. They've wanted us to focus on sort of, we had a very sort of like socially justice one that we did. Some just say do something very general. Sometimes the schools will want us to gear towards a particular, now that we've been in schools for quite a long time, towards a particular issue that they've got, that is sort of rumbling through the school, and they want us to see whether we could tackle some of those things. But even within that, I would have a sort of an individual perspective, a local perspective, a global perspective, something that is sort of issue based, and then that something that is very much around spiritual exploration, so that much more sort of Christian end. So I would try and almost guide the young people in terms of like looking out of themselves, starting with themselves and looking out, but also venturing into that spiritual space for those young people that are less comfortable with it. And then thinking about sort of practical, quiet, craft, reflective sort of spaces. What do they look like? What do they feel like? In terms of how we run the lesson, so we often have 50 or 60 minutes. We will do a welcome. Think about the practicals. For me, it's very much about the practicals in the beginning. Meet them at the door. We don't get the opportunity to hold them in a corridor because there's often 3 or 4 classes in that stairwell or that corridor. So we have to bring them straight into the room. So where are they going to put the bags and coats? How can you clear the clutter? So that for me, sacred space is very much a physical space that allows you into the spiritual. So how do you declutter those young people in order to be able to access the spiritual? Explain who you are, because they might not know, like the primary schools, they don't always tell the young people what they're coming to. So, lay those ground rules very quickly and explain what's coming. There's, some young people really don't like change and they don't like a different lesson. So how can you sort of like ground that for them really, really quickly? And then in the lesson, in that sort of explanation bit, we would sort of tell them who we are, what is the space, what is the purpose of the lesson? So you're sort of guiding them as to where they think they're going. Timings, I like to tell them how long they're going to have in the space, particularly those sort of like when they experience the space so that they can settle into it. And I often give them a bit of a guided tour so that they have a bit of an idea before they go. I let them loose, so to speak. And within that conversation, depending on how long we've got and how quickly they've settled, for me, the most important bit that I protect is that 30 minutes or so that they actually get to experience it in that 50 minutes lesson. But if they settled well, I will talk more extensively about prayer. But if not, I will try and scoop that up at the end, because I actually want them to experience it and live it. We have 4 ways, sort of devise 4 ways for them to enter the space, because I found at a secondary level, I was hit with the I don't want to pray. So I needed to really articulate what that looks like. So we have these sort of 4 routes that we sort of we've simplified a bit really now. We just say observer, thinker, reflector, or person of faith. So choose one of those. So everybody can enter the space. There's no right or wrong, but also remember, you don't know which one your mate is going to use. So your mate could be going down a faith route and you wouldn't know. So, don't assume, and just concentrate on yourself and see what happens for you in this space. But we found those 4 sort of routes really, really helpful. During the lesson, for me, what makes a really good lesson is leading by example. So do the space yourself. So I go around the space and they will see me putting stuff on the different prayer stations. I really, really encourage teachers to do it, because they watch the teachers. And if the teachers are sat at the back and they don't, and they're marking, and what they're demonstrating is that they don't value the space. And when you're in a high school, you're not working with the same teacher. So, you could get a cover teacher, you could get an English teacher, science teacher, anybody that they've put that lesson out of. So really important to do that. And then just the physicality of the space, just keep it calm, keep it quiet, keep it tidy, have those conversations and really enjoy the space. And just, for me, it starts off quite sort of noisy as they're quite sort of keen to go in it. But then it really, really quietens down. And then just very finally, we do an evaluation. So every child will do an evaluation form for us. The most important thing for me is that what was the best thing? So we get these sorts of answers. And that means that then we can feed that back. And if we don't have the opportunity for the conversation because we're having to move through so quick, I get a real sense of what's happened, because it's not always about what you see. So that was a very quick whistle stop, but hopefully we'll have given you a few sort of pointers. All right.
Sam, thank you so much. Amazing. Yeah, I've been learning stuff listening to you and your approach to this. There's some real pearls of wisdom in there, and like really practical, but particularly helping young people to engage well with the space. Really, really good. What we're going to do, folks, is dive into breakout rooms, which gives you a chance just to chat to some other people who they may have run hundreds of prayer spaces. They may be about to run their first. So just opportunity to meet with one or two others, maybe discuss any questions that you have, because we'd love to do a bit of Q&A in a bit. There'll be scope to ask a few questions. We finished formally at 8:30, but we will stay on for just another few minutes in case anybody wants to stick around and ask any more questions after that. But questions, so chat to one another for a wee bit. We'll come back at 8:20. Okay, so you got till 8:20, and then we'll pull you back into the main meeting room. So for now, welcome to a breakout room and some people who you may never have met, but who will become friends. So enjoy the next 10 minutes, and we'll see you soon. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you met some lovely people, had some great conversations, even though there was a short patch of time. Just reminding people, we do send you out an email afterwards. So if there's any links or additional resources, we'll put those into the email that we send out as well. So this next bit is, are there any questions? There was one. So somebody asked, this was to the folks in Impact, do you explain everything each time, even if you've been in that school before? So this is about your introduction to the prayer space. So Becky or Trish, you're able to answer that. Do you use that same explanation, even if you think the class has seen a prayer space before?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, a lot of the time, for some of the schools especially, it is a regular, like, yearly thing that we do. And we do go in and, see those same children again. But there are always going to be some children there that maybe weren't there the last time, and kind of, or that they've forgotten in the past year. They kind of might not remember that space. So even if they do have been and seen it before, we kind of do the introduction beforehand still. And we kind of, we explain for those that haven't been here before, or that just to give you a reminder type of thing. And in some schools, the best way that we kind of do it is because we do creative prayer for the younger end. We kind of explain to them how, a bit more detail what prayer is and things. And we kind of explain, because they've got somebody with them around the stations, they're led through them. As they progress through the school and they get older, then they can progress to the prayer spaces and kind of where they can explore it themselves. And they have already had some input from being in the creative prayer, but it's kind of a next step up. So it's kind of, even then we kind of explain it, and so that they, we know which schools we've been in before, and if we've seen those children before, but we kind of explain it, just so that they understand it again.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no harm in just reminding young children, young people, what the prayer space is and how to engage with it well. I think it's just, even if they've been in before. Somebody's asked, would you hold prayer spaces, creative prayer for young people? So early years, Key Stage 1. So just tell us a little bit of the distinction between creative prayer and prayer space, because I sense there's an age thing around that.
Yeah, Trish, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, because we have done it we have done prayer spaces it's more creative prayer really for the younger ones, because creative prayer is on a smaller scale, so we only might do like 4 or 5 stations and then rotate between them. And what we find with the younger ones, sometimes we've even done it for younger than year 3. We've done it for like maybe year 1, year 2, and even reception. And what we tend to do then is do the stations where they can either draw, or some of them, if they're a little bit older, can write. And then with the interaction with the volunteer on the station, they can engage with the children. And then we try to make it as interactive as possible as well. So it's not just an adult talking to a child, it's also getting them to engage in the conversation as well as then doing the activity. So then we tend to do, for the younger ones, we might do more drawing or something physical that they can make or something like that. Is that everything, Becky, I'd say, hey, for the younger ones? So we don't make it as
so it's there's not a lot of reading, and it's very kind of physical things, and it's not a quiet, peaceful, reflective space at all. Although we try to have music in the background, you can't hear it because they're talking too much. So it's kind of it's more physical, more lively, But there are still in that, as
Yeah.
Sam was saying, you have various types of activities. So it's not all a physical activity, or it's not all writing, or it's not all sitting and being still. They kind of have different ones as they go around. So you know, we have the zones, kind of different areas and different types of things that they can do for different types of learners as well.
Helpful comment from Julie Swan in Cornwall. So Julie's done lots of brilliant prayer spaces all around the nation as she's moved around. But she says we've done it with reception and modified it to be very play orientated. So with the much younger years, it's a much more play, learning about prayer through play kind of approach. Yeah. A question I was going to ask was like just balancing out how you just balance out pupils having time to engage as themselves and at their own pace versus kind of moving them on in groups and things, and how you just balance out those two, I suppose, competing ways of doing it. Is Trish, I'm going to ask you to answer that one. If you unmute.
Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. Sorry.
So we know that we've come across some people who tend to kind of move pupils on almost on a timer basis, and that can make the prayer space feel a little bit too pushed and a bit too edgy. And whereas of course the other approach would be that a child just sits in the calm tent for 45 minutes, and you probably don't want that either. But so how do you balance that? Is there an age group difference between how you would allow pupils to engage in a space, or how fast you'd move them on, that sort of thing? So it's
we try to give about 7 to 10 minutes, isn't it, Becky, for each station if possible. And it's not so much I think we give them the adult might say a few things, but then the way that they question or ask things, and the children actually are engaging. But then you actually then leave them to do the activity, because once they know what they need to do, then we just actually let them just be, and then they continue with that in their own time, in their own space, in that moment, if you see what I'm trying to say. So it's not all just talk. It's they get a little bit of a blurb, then a little bit of them saying a few things if that's necessary, and then just the time that they can then have to reflect on that particular activity. So they do get that time. I find. What do you think, Becky?
That's for the very young ones. We kind of do give them a time limit for the very young ones. It's not but it's not rushing them through. They kind of they know the time. We have a countdown timer, like a visual light up sort of traffic light thing, so they can see that kind of, you know, it goes at a certain pace. So it kind of eases them out gently. It's not rushing them on, and then it goes off, and they'll know it's time to move, and they get into the pattern quite easily. But for the older ones, we don't rush them at all. They're kind of, you know, when it's prayer spaces themselves and they're exploring their space, they kind of, you know, they can take it at their own pace, and it's not a rushed through thing.
I like the idea of the sort of the countdown thing, so they know where they are in the amount of time they have. Because I think that the thing that where we've seen this happen and felt slightly uncomfortable is they're deeply engrossed in prayer activity, and somebody suddenly goes, "Oh, right, we need to move on now," and you just kind of you're spoiling the magic moment, as it were, to put it bluntly. But I suppose if they know where they are, how much time that's a much more gentle way of managing that. Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you. We've got Naomi's put a few resources in the chat. Again, they'll come out in the email, but we've got obviously the prayer activities, which you can download for free from the website. We did during the summer. If you've been on the website recently, you'll notice we've done a massive overhaul in how you can access the prayer activities. There's a much better sorting system, so you can hopefully you can find more of what you're after. It lists them against those 4 spiritual relationships of myself, others, the world, and beyond, or God. And then it also highlights the kind of response style, whether that's a writing, drawing response, whether it's an action response, or whether it's a contemplative response. So you get a better picture of how these different activities are useful and used by children. So there's that. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you.